I'm Dr. Kerry Dinsmore, and I'm a projects manager for environmental charity Fidra, and my role is as a chemical pollution expert. So Fidra is an environmental charity based in Scotland. Our aim is to shine a light on environmental issues, and working collaboratively with industry, policymakers and the public, we aim to develop and deliver really pragmatic solutions to promote positive environmental change. So sometimes this can be as simple as swapping a plastic stem on a cotton bud for a more sustainable paper one, or using the free space on the top of a bus stop to bring plants and biodiversity into city centres. Or as is often the case in the chemicals work, the solution can be more complex and require a lot more innovation and collaboration to succeed. So for example, promoting information systems to make sure that chemicals used in mattresses are traceable, so that you at home can make informed decisions on what you're buying, but also so that we know what we can and can't recycle, or in the case of PFAS, ensuring that we avoid the use of harmful chemicals wherever possible. So PFAS are per and polyfluorinated alkyl substances, but don't worry, you don't need to remember the full name. Sometimes they're also known as forever chemicals. Sometimes you might hear people refer to individual chemicals within the group, such as PFOA, and this is the one that the recent Dark Waters movie focused on. The main thing is that it's not just one chemical, it's a huge group. Some people estimate 4,000 to 5,000. Some people put the number closer to 9,000, but there's a lot of different PFAS. The foundation of PFAS molecules is this long chain of carbon atoms, like a pearl necklace. And some of those are attached to fluorine atoms. When carbon and fluorine get together, they hold on really, really tight to each other. And they're very, very hard to break apart. Some of these chemicals last in the soil for well over 1,000 years, meaning that almost all the PFAS ever produced is still in our environment today. And we call this sort of long-lasting chemical a persistent chemical, and hence the name forever chemicals. And its first commercial use was in non-stick cookware, hailed as this miracle innovation that quickly spread throughout the world. Everybody wanted non-stick in their frying pans. And it's this, something that consumers now take for granted. It's widely used as a stain-resistant treatment in clothing. It repels oil and water. So also things like durable water repellent outdoor gear, tents, your waterproof jacket, even water repellent swimwear, which makes it dry slightly quicker. And the grease resistant part of it has meant that it's spread throughout food packaging as well. And that's something I'll talk a bit more about later. And this innovative chemical has found its way into almost everything in our daily lives. But there's a darker side to the story. And unfortunately, we got excited and we expanded its use without fully understanding the consequences. And that's something that we're now dealing with. So there is a huge number of PFAS, and it might be surprising to know that even though they are in use in so many of the products in our homes and everywhere around us, we actually know very, very little about the vast majority of them. Those that have been well studied, and we are talking a handful, you count them on one hand how many we know a lot about, but they've been linked to lots of different impacts on our health and the environment. So for example, they can interfere with our body's ability to fight off germs, our immunity, and they can even reduce how well vaccines work. Some are thought to increase your chance of getting certain types of cancers, and they can interfere with the hormones in the bodies, both ours and those of animals as well. So there's huge amount of different impacts, all depending on which chemical it is, how much we're exposed to, and how long we're exposed to it. And similarly in wildlife, there's studies that have shown that they can affect the brain function in polar bears, immune systems of otters. We're really only scratching the surface of what we understand about them. And as I mentioned before, they are persistent, and it's this persistent makes them really, really important that we manage them, because we may not know all of the problems that they can cause, but what we do know is that when we use them and once they get into the environment, we can't get rid of them. They're going to be there for a long time. All they're going to do is build up. So almost all the PFAS that have ever been made since they were first discovered are still in our environment. They're still out there and they're still having an effect. So it means that there's a very urgent problem that if we don't solve it now, those concentrations are just building up. So we may not be exposed to high concentrations of them right now, but we have to take action. So at Fidra, we have a sort of two-pronged attack on how we want to deal with PFAS. we like to look at a specific case study and then try and get that to raise attention and to take small amounts of action. So we started looking, first of all, at stain resistance in school uniforms. Is it really needed? Are people noticing that the stain resistance in their school uniform, and are they getting any benefit from it? So we did some consumer surveys, and we looked at whether, if people were buying uniforms with stain resistance on it, were they washing them less? Were they keeping them for longer? And what we found was actually that they weren't. People were still washing them just as frequently, and they were replacing them just as often, because you're not replacing the school uniform because there's a stain on it. You're replacing it because the child has grown out of it. So that was one case. It was very simple for us to go to supermarkets and say, we don't want you to come up with a very complicated chemical alternative. What we're saying is that people aren't getting benefit from the stain resistance, so actually you can just remove it. The next thing we started looking at was food packaging. So you often find, as PFAS is used in food packaging, not the plastic packaging, but the cardboard, paper, and some of the molded fiber packaging. So things like the compostable thing that you may now get your fish and chips in instead of polystyrene. We did some testing and we found that PFAS is often used in those. And the reason it's used is because it's very good at repelling oil and grease. So if you were to put your greasy sausage roll into a bag that had nothing treated, it would probably soak through and it would fall out the bottom, and nobody wants that. So what we're doing is that we're working with supermarkets, and again, highlighting the issue to them and showing them that there is solutions and that there's things that they can do. So we raise the issue with them, and then we show that there's support. So we do some work with investors, explaining the issue to them, and they put pressure on the supermarkets. And we also work with the public. So we had almost 12,000 people sign up to our recent petition to supermarkets asking that they remove PFAS from food packaging. So again, we're just showing that everybody wants this out and that there are solutions. The other side of things is that we work with policymakers. So it's one thing to ask for this voluntary action, which is a brilliant first step, but really what we need is the policy. So we need this to be regulated at UK level. So we're asking that they take action on food packaging, and we're asking for that to be done quite soon, because this is an issue that's growing. We all want to get rid of plastic packaging, and we're all conscious that we're moving towards what are meant to be sustainable and eco-friendly packaging. And we need to make sure that that packaging we're moving to is not actually going to open up a whole new problem of its own. We don't want to switch from plastic straight to PFAS. We want genuine environmentally friendly options. And obviously the best thing to do is to work with reusables, where you're not throwing anything away or producing things that aren't necessary. I would say it's working really well, much better than we first expected, to be honest, and things are moving and they're really gaining momentum at the moment. So as I say, we have examples that we can work from. So we know that Danish supermarkets have got rid of PFAS, and we know that legislative wise that they can no longer use it, and that's what we want to see in the UK. In terms of the supermarkets, it's been really good. They stood up and they listened. When we put the petition forward to them, they've seen that. They can see that their customers are asking for it, and they are starting to look. A lot of them are looking through their supply chains, trying to identify where it is. Some of them are further along than others, but the main thing is that they're all talking to us. All of the major supermarkets are paying attention to this. A year ago, they didn't really know what PFAS was, or the people in packaging maybe didn't. Now it's being discussed, and that's a huge step forward, and that comes from them seeing that it's what everybody wants. And the other thing is the policy side of it. Again, what we asked a lot of our supporters to do just before Christmas was to write to their MPs. And we ended up having more than 70% of the UK MPs received a letter from a constituent asking them to raise the issue of PFAS in Parliament. And they've done that, and we've seen that in discussions. So now it's gone from being something that they knew was coming and that they were sort of conscious of it not doing anything, to it's a really top priority. One of the most important things that I do is that I have a background in research and science, and I take what is very complicated scientific data, very dispersed scientific data, and I can try and translate that to people, because often if I'm talking to somebody in supermarkets, they don't have that scientific background. They have a lot of conflicting pressures, and what they need is that very simple information to present the problem. So a lot of what I do is translation. It's taking science and it's translating that. The other thing I do is bring people together, and it's really important to be able to see things from different people's angles. So we can go in and we can shout that there's a problem, but it's not going to get anywhere until we can develop a solution. So you've got to see where their barriers are and then try to solve those from the other side. So we work with suppliers to show them that there is solutions. So a lot of it is just understanding other people's point of views. What are the barriers? Why have they not taken action already? And what's going to prevent them in the future? And then starting to remove those and working together, because it's that pragmatic solution-based approach is something that Fidra really puts forward. So my background is in science, somebody else's background is in communications, somebody else has more of a policy aspect. And it's as a group, I lead the project, but it's all of us in Fidra together that develop how we're going to move things forward. And you just couldn't do it working on your own. It's not possible. So teamwork is extremely important, and understanding everybody's different point of view and using everybody's strengths to actually push action through is very, very important for this. My favorite thing about the job that I'm doing at the minute is that I can see things changing. So for me, it's very exciting. The first couple of years we worked on this, it was very difficult. My inbox was empty. I was writing a lot of letters and nobody was coming back to me. And now I can see things are happening and I can see real change on the horizon. And that is so positive, and it just drives you and motivates you. And I also just love that I'm meeting so many different people from different walks of life. So, the science community is something that I've always been part of. But I didn't understand how supply chains worked. I didn't understand business. I didn't understand investors. And every day is a learning opportunity, because I'm constantly trying to understand other people's roles and perspectives. And I find that fascinating. I think it's constantly learning. Nothing is ever standing still. So it's very exciting, and it's very, very broad what we do. At the moment, we're pushing and we've got all these things happening. And I think the next step is really just keep that going and keep that momentum. And there is this public engagement side of it. So we have our bead test, which you can find on our website, which is pfasfree.org.uk. And if you go /bead test, you'll go directly to that. So we're really trying to promote that. We're trying to get people to sign up to it, to look at what's in their own packaging. And I think not just in PFAS, but in chemicals in generally, I think what we're trying to do is build this awareness that if there's a function that wasn't there before, people start to ask themselves, where did it come from? Do I need this new function? And what are the trade-offs? Because at the minute, we really don't have that. So it's engaging the public and making chemicals and chemical pollution a talking point again. It almost seems like it was done in the 70s and the 80s, and then we moved on. And we have to recognize the importance of climate, chemical pollution alongside things like climate, because they all interact. Both of them are building that fundamental base, bedrock on which everything else survives. It's just linked to everything. And I think it's getting that attention back on it would be really important. And the other things that we're next for our project is that it's moving. So we keep going with it. We keep that pressure up, because, we have policy movement, but that doesn't happen quickly. If we were to get them to commit to legislation, it then takes a lot of time for that to come through. There's a lot of details. There could be a lot of loopholes. So it's not so much a next step, but it's a step that's going to take a very long time. And we're on that road, and we just have to keep going now.